that many people contested and opposed it. For example, the case of French Revolution and the kind of consequences that we witnessed, and again the kind of political philosophy that emerged out of this particular situation. For example, Hegelian concept, Hegel mainly focused on giving importance to state supremacy again, and sidelining the individual kind of rights, individual importance. But you know that in the 20th century again, collective interest or kind of the collective interest in the sense that liberty, the classical period to modern liberty, you can see that individual liberty, individual rights have been given a kind of great importance.
Sir, please tell Girish to mute his mic.
Girish, I think, okay. So that is also a very important development which took place in the 20th century. You can see that the problem of identifying the individual liberty and versus state kind of interference. In the post-liberal or post-neoliberal period, we witnessed, for example, in the era of globalization, again a great debate also happened in the field of placing where exactly we have to focus. That means should we give importance to individual or should we give importance to state? But in the democratic framework, we feel that neither individual nor state is absolute, because it should go in a kind of limited way. For example, a state is absolute on security matters, and again individual is absolute on the matters related to his sphere of actions where it is not interfering in the public matters. Anyway, here I think Professor Thakur's topic is very, very important in the sense that he is focusing on the security dimensions. So we are all very, very curious to know the way in which he is presenting his ideas. So I welcome Professor Harish K. Thakur on behalf of the Department of Political Science, University of Kerala, and invite him to present or to deliver his lecture. Okay. Now over to Professor Harish Thakur.
Thank you very much, Professor Sajjad Ibrahim ji. It's a matter of honor that Murli Dharanji is also there. And thanks to Suresha to give me the opportunity to converse with the students. As Professor Abraham has laid down the foundation of this lecture, I found that half of my job was over. He has given a wide spectrum of shades of ideas over the idea of security, which is fundamental to almost all the concepts. In political science, the people normally come across concepts like liberty, equality, dignity, fraternity. But the concept that is less discussed but more important and which is more central to all these concepts is the idea of security. I would begin from the broader attempts at drawing the definitions of security at UN level. And then I will move to scholarly levels, to philosophers' levels in the later section of my dialogue. Because we all know that philosophers are great in raising questions, but they never answer them. And the same is here, the relationship between individual and state. It began with we have the habit of articulating the things. We have the habit of getting a start from Greek or European background, but in Indian background also, much before the European, we have discussions over the idea of state, over the idea of Raj Dharma, over the idea of Dharma. and over the performance of duty by an individual at individual level, at social level, and at the same time, the duty by government that was represented in earlier time by monarchs and now by democratic states. But before I go into the philosophical discussions that range from the Vedic period through the Greeks, Socrates, Aristotle, till now, the current public intellectuals like Francis Fukuyama, Huntington, Harari, Paul Kennedy, what they have spoken about the space of individual in 21st century vis-a-vis state. It is an interesting debate. But before I come to this latter section of my discussion, I would place certain developments, especially in the area of IR. We all know that realism, I won't go long back. We can start from Kautilya, we can start from Sanju. But I would begin from Hobbesian's Leviathan. The kind of government that he creates, the contractualist, he was later on modified by the other two by John Locke and Rousseau. But I would begin with Thomas Hobbes, how he defines the nature of man. It itself, the definition itself is debatable. Quite contrast goes John Locke then. And then in the pre-war period, in the First and Second World War, the behavior of states, we all know that states suffered just because of the narrowness of the kind of human nature that was explained, that was depicted by Hobbes. So we can say that Hobbesian kind of nature caused global disorder in the pre-Second World War period. And the post-World War period, the Cold War era, it witnessed the engagement of power blocks and the formation of power blocks again, individual writ large, if we take the Platonian conception of state. State is just mere the extension of individual nature. So all the individual elements which exist at the individual level, they expand up to state level. And state is mere the expression of that. So this realism that Hobbes expressed 2 centuries back was re-propounded by Hans Morgenthau, who says that again that state of nature that was given that was redesignated as the anarchic state of affairs, that the global order, there is no order actually, it is an orderless state of affairs, just like state of nature of the contractualists. And then Morgenthau says that out of this anarchy, the state system that began with the Westphalian initiation, triggering of the modern nation-state system. So he goes on to propound that the chief actors in this anarchical order are states and their sovereign powers. And the state interaction and the interaction among these sovereign entities, they determine the global status. They determine the direction of developments of the world politics. And he was, though in between there were oppositions, there were counter arguments and counter currents in the thought stream of philosophy. His idea was carried further by Kenneth Waltz. We all know that his new realism just carried forward. He can be called the second Morgenthau, who said that the relationships among the sovereign states could be determined by the pressures that are exerted by the anarchic structures present. Now, which anarchic structures, he has presented several models about that. They are difficult to grasp and at times difficult to digest even, but then political scientists and philosophers, as I said, they can raise questions, they can pass suggestions. It is not necessary that they are right and they will never answer them. So Kenneth Walsh marks the continuation of realism of Morgenthau and Thomas Hobbes. But as soon as the Cold War reflection of this realism faces a downturn after the collapse of Soviet Union, we find that the element of multipolarity enters into world politics. From unipolarity to multipolarity, this is a very critical phase where several state junctures and disjunctures happen, where several alignments and de-alignments take place. So in the post-Cold War era, what is important is that due to over obsession with the clash of states, with the clash of state sovereignties, with the clash of the epitomization of human nature by sovereign states, leaderships, there was a shift in the thinking of political scientists, scholars, philosophers, sociologists, political economists. And international political economists wanted that the shift of thought, the shift of concern from international institutions, state system, should be towards globalization, opening up towards IT revolution. Social approaches were there, sociologists were there. They wanted that the shift should be towards the inter-society relationships, intra-societal conditions, the condition of man in society. And then at the same time, another stream of thought emerges. This is not a stream, I take it as a counter reaction to over-modernism. Modernization introduced certain meta-narratives into our lives. The state system, the sovereignty, the Western liberal capitalist order, the communist order. And these meta-narratives try to dictate the things according to their set objectives, which don't suit individual. I remember that in the initial reference, Sajjad Abraham suggested that there is no way out if we take the absolute or extreme ends. There has to be a midway, the middle path, just like Gautam Buddha gave us. So out of these meta-narratives, postmodernism takes place. They rejected the Western idea, the capitalist idea that globalization will bring a uniformity, the global market culture will bring a uniformity, it will bring prosperity to people. It has been rejected now. Fukuyama is much into it, that what has gone wrong with the globalization narrative in 21st century. That was the concern of Paul Kennedy. That is the concern of Harari. So postmodernism wanted to deconstruct these meta-narratives and break the barriers of those meta-narratives who superimposed the ideas of state, of sovereignty, the sovereign state, nothing above them. Individual was dwarfed. The individual status was dwarfed. The individual space for life was minimized. So the postmodernism was a reaction against the over-imposition, the superimposition of those meta-narratives of modernism. And now postmodernism focuses on the revitalization, reinvigoration, re-strengthening of what is not meta in nature, what is local in nature. They focus on the local cultures, local languages, regional cultures, zonal habitats or lifestyles, about the lives of indigenous people, about the lives of tribes which have been seriously injured by the process of globalization. We all know that. So what was suggested was that in international politics and relationship among states, we can underline certain patterns of relationships. For example, we all understand that in Cold War era, the relationship between USA and USSR was of what kind? They were the leaders of two power blocks. The relations between India and Pakistan, the relations between India and China are of what kind? So Walls proposes that out of this anarchic structural environment, these relationships, these patterns could be explained. Just like we can explain the story between Athens and Sparta. So in this UNDP Human Development Report, there was no reference to violence, there was no reference to war, there was no reference to terrorism. Means that a shift was registered for the first time in the United Nations in the post-Cold War era towards the space what individuals should have in this order. Then there were certain developments. I will read out them just by our name, just for the sake of students. For example, for the first time, Independent Commission on Disarmament and Security Issues in 1982, they for the first time spoke about the space of individual vis-a-vis state. For the first time, that voice was raised. And in 1987, the Brundtland Commission report, they spoke about sustainable development and environment as important ingredients of the philosophy of individual against the world order we are obsessed with. And then in 2000, UN Millennium Summit was there, and Human Security Network was established. In 2001, UN Commission on Human Security was there. In 2004, the Human Security Unit was established. In 2006, the Friends of Human Security, an organization of about UN members, all the UN members, was established for the discussion of human security. So this was my first part, in which I wanted to elaborate the concerns about the security and the shift that has been registered. Now I would go for the philosophical dimensions of the relationship between man and society, between man and state. Man and society and man and state, they have huge variations in meaning. State is an organized shape. And as we know that man is just like animals, man is a gregarious animal, and we live in groups. And the first sense why humans or why animals start living in a group form, it's not that they want freedom, it's not that they want some political right or claim. It is the primary sense of security. This is the primary feeling that leads to group formation. It leads to the formation of family. It leads to the formation of the family writ large, that is state. So the idea of security is at the root of state. Now, what about after in this post-Cold War era, there were several volumes which discussed the state of individual in society, the state of individual in the global order. And I would begin with one volume was by Paul Kennedy, United Nations, the Parliament of Man, 2006. In 2006, this volume was published. And Paul Kennedy begins quite wonderfully this volume when he discusses a poem of Alfred Tennyson, the Locksley Hall, in the beginning. The Locksley Hall is just an imagination of a poet. And Alfred Tennyson, in that imagination, thinks of a world government. He thinks of the Federation of States. And he thinks that the coming world order, the poets are always the best people of the world. They don't have the narrow blood or ethnic territories in their minds. They have quite philanthropic hearts. They speak of global brotherhood, they speak of humanity, they speak of love and compassion and all that. So Alfred Tennyson imagined a kind of society, a kind of world state. The same state was discussed later on by Jawaharlal Nehru in 1939. He speaks about a world confederation on American lines. As United States was founded as a confederation, Jawaharlal Nehru also spoke about a world confederation. It should be a world, there should be a government, and the states should be members, and all the states should have a dignified place. But we all know that the territory is the biggest enemy of state, and states spend everything on the defense of their territories, and that overstuffed with the money against the sectors which are primary to human security, which are primary to human development, which are primary to the instrumentality, the modality of education that can help us raise the status of individual in society, education. We all know that the budget of defense in India, what is the budget on defense? It is more than 2 times than the budget on education. So this is the concern of state about the space of individual. Noam Chomsky, he calls America a scoundrel state, a rogue state. Openly, he is living in the United States. He is a linguist and a public intellectual, but he openly says that the US capitalist system has developed an education system. Out of 500 world universities, the rankings of US universities are about 70–80%. The rest of the world is diminished to the 3rd, 4th position. So education has been used as just as the brain drain theory of Dadabhai Naoroji, that is still true about the United States. The brain has been tapped. It has been tapped with the instrumentality of the capitalist plans of hiring brains. And then Alvin Toffler, the author of Third Wave. In 2006, he also produced a wonderful volume, The Revolutionary Wealth. And he alarms the world community that, see, the 21st century is going to be a century of challenge. How? He says that today world revolution will unlock countless opportunities for the development of entrepreneurship, the social entrepreneurship, the cultural entrepreneurship, the economic entrepreneurship, the educational entrepreneurship. But keep this in mind that as soon as the things go, there will be infinite, there will be uncontrolled flow of calamities on earth. The risks will land on earth. And the man of the today, man of the present, is not having the strength to face that. See what happens with the COVID pandemic. Just 14 years back, Alvin Toffler wrote that. The times are there that man will not be faced to, we are enjoying the luxuries and benefits of information technology and globalization, but the worst will come in the same proportion. And see, The richest state, the state that spoke of the best health system in the world, Italy, it has suffered the most. United States and Germany. Germany has performed better. UK, they have suffered the worst. And the states which were considered poor, and many statements came from WHO, from China, from US health expertise. They said that we are bothered about India. India is such a hugely populated state, and they don't have resources. The IC this intensive bed care units, ICUs, the ratio per 1 million in India was 4 or 5. United States, it was 24. In Italy, it was 16. They were far better placed, but look at the consequences. India has performed much better. People are now, Bill Gates gives the explanation that, see, India has been fighting these calamities, natural disasters, droughts. They have been fighting these things consistently over the decades. Therefore, India was mentally more prepared to counter this. There were other reasons also, but this is how disaster management takes place. Now I will come to another interesting chap. He has made a good name in political science, and then now he is withdrawing from what he said earlier, end of history. Francis Fukuyama. He said he was quite happy. United States led a wonderful life. Might be that his volumes were missioned, and he got profited from certain institutions. So he said, in the flow of emotions, he came out with the idea that the history has ended. The Western capitalist order has overcome the leftist order. His conclusions were based on the idea that the idea of growth has got earthed in Soviet Union. And Soviet Union needs a restructuring of its economy on the Western capitalist order way, on the Western model. But this was the biggest miscalculation on his part. And later on, he repents that his statement, because things didn't go that way. The world became multipolar, and the philosophies have survived. The left wing is more on the offing in Europe than ever. People are finding space for different ideas. Enough with anti-immigration, enough with the anti-Asian movements. Enough with Trumpism. The idea of identity, this is interesting volume, Identity, if you have gone through Francis Fukuyama's volume, in which he discusses, he takes a different route of individual space in society. That is interesting, and that brings him quite close to Mahatma Gandhi. If you have gone into the volume of Identity, he tries to draw the mental traits of a man, that he gives it a name soul, which consists of 3 elements. And one element is spiritedness, that is desire, that he calls, I have written somewhere, thymos. And this thymos is the spiritedness, the desire, and it is causative of isothymia. Isothymia, he says that it is the urge for recognition in society. Every individual wants recognition. In India, society is truncated into several bases, on the basis of religion, on the basis of caste, and every individual related with any group, any background wants dignity. Dignity is primary to life. Food is not enough. If you don't have dignity, food is that will be a survival of the level of animal. So he says that this isothemia leads to another current in human mind, that is megalothemia. Isothemia is the desire to be recognized in society. Megalothemia is the desire to dominate. And the whole history is the unfolding of these elements of mind. Desire to be recognized, desire to be. He takes a different route. And Mahatma Gandhi, we time and again we land on the ideas of Mahatma Gandhi, and then we come to realize that how central the ideology of Mahatma Gandhi is. That I don't have any ideology. I am a dynamic person. I keep on changing with times. That is the beauty of Gandhism. It is not stable. It is not stale. Gandhi gave the idea of moral man. He gave the basic elements in that morality of man, where he has to live vis-a-vis society, where he has to grow vis-a-vis community, and he has to have a sense of freedom to the extent it doesn't go against the freedom of the common good of the society. It reminds us of T.H. Green also, who gave the idea of political obligation. Freedom is not unlimited. We have to impose certain limits on freedom, impose certain restrictions on freedom. And the biggest challenge, what Fukuyama says, I will go to another volume of Francis Fukuyama. He is a wonderful person. His writings are wonderful, though rejected by many. But sometimes certain things stay in your mind. He says that the world, students of political science must be knowing that he discussed the idea of getting to Denmark idea. In 2011, he said that in Political Order, something that was his volume, State Building and Political Order, it was published in 2011. He said that the purpose of the democratic state should be to get to Denmark, getting to Denmark. Because Denmark is, he speaks not of the Denmark of today. He speaks of the Denmark of a particular period when the democratic institutions were mature there. Rule of law, rule of governance, political accountability, and effective state, these are the elements of a good democracy. And he elaborates that China has an effective state, but it doesn't have rule of law. It doesn't have good governance. That's true of Islamic states also. India has rule of law. India has good governance, but India doesn't have effective state. Indian state is weak state. That's how it has gone into balkanization way. And he says that overarching narrative of patrimonialism, it's a complex of ideas. When he says that human beings are they have biologically rooted elements which lead them to favor kiths and kins. That is in human blood. And this idea of patrimonialism that comes again in this, reflects again in the isothemia and megalothemia and thymos theory later on in 2019 in his volume Identity. A good state, a good political order should be able to check this patrimonialism. If you want to make the individual space safe, if you want to provide enough space for individual in society, then to safeguard patrimonialism, to eliminate patrimonialism, a good political order is required. That should have the elements of Denmark of the day. Here, Denmark might have appealed to him. He may be having reasons to explain that, because he says that Denmark at one stage represented political accountability, effective state, and good governance. That is the need of the time. Only this kind of system, you call it in any other terminology, but this kind of systems, we can expect that the space of individual will be safer. And these theoretical propositions, if you are into theories and if you are into travelings into philosophical discourses, then one kind of theory will remind you of another. It reminded me of Gramsci, who gave the idea of cultural hegemony. And it was a wonderful idea. And I find that what has been called today the populist trend in world politics, be it Trumpism, be it in European states, and be it in India even, the populist trend represents the Gramscian representation, if not fully, partially. His cultural hegemony, he very simply said that, see, this capitalist order is going to survive. You can't fight this. Gramsci himself fought against that system and died. And he said that this cultural hegemony will sustain. How? The left-wing propositions will be there, the trade unions will be there, the agriculturists will protest. But the answer to that, this capitalist order has got. They will simply accept certain demands of the trade unionists, pacify them, and impose the new conditions. And this capitalist order is significant on account of the factor that they will use the primary cultural thread of that society to overwhelm the smaller cultural units. And that is what we call populism today. The cultural element that is very important in populist narratives of politics. The anti-immigration movement, the Black Lives Matter, and the European anti-immigrant movements, all are reflective of these trends. So, wading through all these political philosophies, in the ultimate, in the final portion of my presentation, I again land on that confusing terrain that philosophers raise several questions, but they never answer them. The answers are difficult. What Francis Fukuyama in Identity proposes that the world is going to be downgraded, the world is going to be down with the identitarian conflicts based on ethnicities. This is what is happening today. The black, white, the racial and the community distances were never so far, so huge in Europe and United States in the 50s and 60s as they are today. The continental feelings predicted by Huntington were never so acute as they are today. And Harari is a young chap from Israel and much sold author, a historian. He says that he takes another route. He says that, see, the 21st century, we are not going to have a challenge from poverty or environmental challenge. He overlooks them. He says that the major challenge is from artificial intelligence. The major challenge is from robotics. To some extent, he is right. If you go for a survey in our educational institutions, we will find that people are happy with social media than their classroom teaching. People are happy with the different apps on their phone than libraries. This is something, and this man Harari, Yuval Harari, he predicts that after 50 or 100 years, I think that humanity may come to an end. It was a strange proposition. Because if you take it analytically, then he is representing the sample of the developed world. This is not true of Africa. This is not true of Asia. We are poor people. They don't have what to speak of mobiles or technology, they don't have the technology to till the lands. We are into stages of development. The cyclic theory that was propounded by we don't go into that much. The theory of, if someone can remind me, I'm forgetting that the cycle of history, इतिहास चक्र, इस तरह की बात हमारे सोशलिस्ट राममनोहर लोहिया ने भी की है. He spoke about the circles. At one time, if we see the medicine tables, and sometimes I feel bad that maybe this is my personal feeling that maybe this is what people call that the colonial educational system has misguided us. Maybe that kind of influence, that we are not ready to hear about the glorification of our mainland. Medicine tables tell us that if India is taken holistically in its present shape, till 13th, 14th century, India was in GDP, India was world #1 power. You go into medicine tables. With the advent of foreign aggressions and foreigners and aggressors, so many things, and the economy had a slide, and China emerged as the #1 economy of the world. And the percentage was quite huge, 30 and 35% for both India and China. India remained #1 for 1500 years, 1300 years. They calculate this GDP from Christian era. And with the Industrial Revolution, China was colonized by Britain. So it was Europe and then gradually United States. In 1911 or 1920, if you see the value of Indian rupee, 1 Indian rupee was equivalent to $13. But there's a huge transformation. But then history repeats. Time comes. Asia comes. Asia reaches now. This is the cycle. Harish says that artificial intelligence and technology is the biggest challenge for humanity. But this is not true. Half of the humanity, more than half of the humanity, has not reached that level that they are benefiting from technology that way. So in all, if I come to wind up the things, Professor Menon had given me 30-35 minutes. I have used my time. So in the, I'm getting certain messages that they pose questions. About that I will also come later on. That the space of individual is primary. My personal thinking is that the space of individual is primary. Institutions have been coined for the protection of individual. Individuals started living in a group form in an organization for protection, for seeking freedom, for realization of his freedom. So the space of individual needs more attention. But the problem is that with the current 21st century ethnic, identitarian and populist trends in politics, things have worsened. Technology has made its route. We have to be friendly with technology, but we have to be cautious about its use. Technology can't be given free sway to rule over man. And that will happen only with the Gandhian man, who is a moral man, who knows how to live in society, who knows he has to perform his job, who knows he doesn't have to he was far against heavy industrialization. We are seeing the consequences. It led to unemployment. That doesn't mean that heavy industrialization is bad, but there should be a moderate way for that too. So for individual space, individual has to struggle. This can happen through NGOs. This can happen through parliamentarians. Things can be remedied. It's not that things are impossible. Things can be remedied. And the space for individual could be earned, but in the current times, how much space your freedom will find in social media, in social media and in TV channels, we won't get that reflection that we normally expect. For that, we have to struggle. For that, a continuous tug between the realists, the neorealists, and the individualists, that will always be on. As Professor Ibrahim said, that tug is going to stay. But then we have to, I'm getting some message from us. If someone reads that message to me, I'm getting some questions. About questions, what happened that once a philosopher, a German professor, was widely invited for lectures. Once he was going to attend lecture, deliver lecture in some new city. People didn't know him, and he was having a huge cough and fever. So his chauffeur, his driver, was habitual of listening to his lectures everywhere he went. So that day, driver said that, Prasad, if you don't mind, I can deliver your lecture. I have memorized it completely. So driver delivers the lecture. And when it came to the question part, then driver said that, see, these questions are very petty and small questions. My driver is sitting there. He will do that for you. So professor will do that for. So these are that kind of activities. See, we are into, when we are into debates, there is no space for taking sides. Remember, as a student of political science, the value neutrality is primary. If that is at the core of your research attitude, then you will succeed. If you take sides, then it will create problems. So, since the philosophical discourses will continue, we will strike our heads against theories and constructions and deconstructions. But the end result will be nothing. Philosophers just raise questions, they don't answers, and their propositions, if they are good. For example, Fukuyama says that to meet that identity crisis or the quest for recognition, that he calls isothermia, the quest for recognition in society, if you want to meet that, he takes Gellnerian way. You must have heard about Ernest Gellner, who spoke about nationalism and how a state could be, a state could coincide with the idea of a strong nation. So he speaks about certain symbols, national symbols. He speaks about, for example, we have national song, we have national symbols, national flag. He speaks about national services. Fukuyama takes the same Gellnerian route, and he says that we have to create national services. We have to create, he uses the word, we have to create national civil services. We have to create national civil cadre services, not in the administrative way. We have to create certain national civil cycles of memberships, which could inculcate civil values into ethnic minds, so that the narrowness of ethnicity could be turned down, that could be suppressed, and a secular state could emerge. This is the biggest challenge of today. I hope that you liked my presentation, and I won't mind even if you didn't like. Thank you very much, Suresh ji. Thank you very much, Abraham ji. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Professor Harish Thakur, for a detailed presentation, and you touched almost all aspects of the relationship between individual and state, especially by in the context of the emerging issues of security dimensions. And I think that you covered many philosophical points as well as national politics, international politics, even the contemporary realities, contemporary issues, especially our the current pandemic period, how the states are moving in different directions. So thank you for the nice presentation. I think our participants must have a few questions and comments. So
I
I
got some questions on comment box. If
I
you
think
can,
Rukmini, please read out the comments because my eyes are not that much good to read
Yes,
out.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. I will read it out. Professor, there's a question from Deepak Krishna Kumar. So, how can the idea of foreknowledge propounded by Sun Tzu be useful for any state to maintain security in their own territory and also outside? Also, is this idea the basis for creation of intelligence agencies?
this is a wonderful. In fact, it is a suggestion, not a question. Sanju and Kautilya, I have gone through the volumes of both the scholars and both are contemporaries. I think Kautilya happened to be 30, 40 years after Sanju, or people are not sure about that. So the Kautilyan Arthashastra is a far better presentation than Sanju. Sanju's volume is, I think, a 70, 80 page, a small booklet. You can get it in 100, 150 rupees. But I have one strong objection against the Sanju's propositions. And the Chinese army, when it retreated from Galwan, to some extent, I found that they are following the Sanju's counsel. That you keep on shouting, this has happened, we will do this and we will do that. That is the Sanju's strategy of terrorizing your enemy. And then in the ultimate, when you find that logistically you are losing, then you withdraw. So that is the Sanju's counsel that is very important. And the point, 4-point knowledge, if you can right now note down the place them in dialog box, I can discuss them, because right now I can't recollect those 4 points of knowledge that this student is asking about. But he must be from defense and strategic studies, I know. And these kind of questions are there. And Kautilya has become very important in Indian foreign policy assertions. Kautilya, again, he's not less than Sanju. He says that you have to subdue your neighbor if it is poor, if it is weak. And Kautilya also suggests certain parameters, how to subjugate, how to suppress your enemy, how to overcome your neighbors. So these kind of philosophies were given in a time 3,000 years back, 2,500 years back, when the wars were fought with swords and spears. We are into a different world. Technology has transformed a lot. So it's not, we can take the idea, but materializing that idea can be a havoc in present day world. We should keep it in mind. But ideas always suggest new ideas. That's how Sanju and Kautilya are important.
Any questions or comments from the students, our professors?
Harish, you have made a wonderful presentation, and as our chair has rightly commented that you have touched all aspects related to individual state interactions. And see, my question to you is that, see, in the philosophical terms, Sri Aurobindo also talk about the evolutionary process in humankind from
Yes.
From the primitive society to that of community to that of a nation state to international. So he talked about all these things happen in an evolutionary process. So do you think that this kind of spread of pandemic or this non-traditional threat to security issues, especially in climate, in the morning, um, Vice Admiral was also talking about that. So this non-traditional threat gives a platform for all nations to join together and to move towards a world state, as you have noted. And see, again, of course, if you look into ideas, then basically, if you look into the human nature, there is no much change in the human nature from Kautilya days to present. So in that context, what is your comment on that? Okay, thank you, Harish. Thank you, Chair.
It's a Menanji, wonderful suggestion that the idea of world government is always fascinating. It has been suggested by Alfred Tennyson. Even before Alfred Tennyson, it appeared, I think, in the writings of I think Adam Smith also hinted towards that. He spoke about a global capitalist order. His invisible hand is a representation of nature only. So Jawaharlal Nehru also spoke about that. And the Arbindonian idea about world government or world federation, I'm unaware of that right now. If you have suggested, I would like to come up with what Arbindo actually, for me, he was a core nationalist. But then when he withdrew from his active political career into a spiritual mode of life at Pondicherry, he spent the rest of his life. Might be that in later on his contributions he has spoken about. He spoke about the holistic development of humanity. He spoke about his philosophy of holism speaks that if you die and if you go to Swarga, that doesn't mean that you have attained your objective. It is not your duty. You have to come back on earth. You have to enlighten your fellow beings, and you have to prepare whole of the community to get that salvation. So that kind of cycling of thought of Aurobindo is wonderful. But about world government, right now I don't have answer to these suggestions of your because I can't recall. I have read, but I didn't read the actual volumes of Aurobindo. I read the one Nationalism and Aurobindo written by Karan Singh, the king of the last king of Jammu and Kashmir, Karan Singh. He did PhD on Aurobindo, and his PhD thesis has been published by, I don't recall the publisher. It is there. It is on the philosophy of Aurobindo. So I have gone through that volume completely. So my knowledge is a little bit, not little bit, quite less about Aurobindo. I won't be able to come out with the Aurobindo suggestion, but the idea of world government is fascinating. What if, as many people, many utopian thinkers suggest that the current UN members should this has been proposed. I don't recall exactly where and when was the proposition and by whom. But a few decades back, it was there that what if the states and their territories are frozen as they are. For example, maintenance of status quo, and the world government will go on to settle the things later on. But the states are, this may be the philosophy of poor states, because they are at the loser's end. But those, the developed world, they will never approve with the idea of the world government, because United States and China and European states, they are the biggest financer of United Nations. So they are not going to lose the leverage. Well, India is the biggest claimant for UN Security Council seat. But the biggest aberration against India's membership of UN Security Council seat is that the Indian, only a few days back, I came across the figure that India is the 23rd largest a donator of funds to United Nations. You want to be among first 5, and your position is 23rd. Economy-wise, India is 5th or 6th in world. So our contribution to United Nations should be in that proportion. So there are many ifs and buts in between. Thank you very much for your suggestion. I will go through Arbindo's volume and his ideas about world government, sir.
Any questions or comments? I think everybody are in I think in the afternoon session we had the problem of getting some energy, you know.
No problem, sir. I enjoyed, at least I enjoyed.
We all enjoyed it. Yeah, we all enjoyed it.
I would request Professor Menon that if you have recorded it, kindly pass me the recorded version so that I can place it, I can circulate it among my friends.
Yeah, sure. That will be.
Also, my students would also not.
Yes, Professor Harish, is there anybody to?
Yeah. No, just
okay,
Rukmini.
I will make my vote of thanks. Those I will hand over to our chair. So, Professor Harish, thank you for the nice presentation. Of course, it's a delightful and a very thought-provoking. Of course, we are very much fortunate to have your discussion, and also the kind of ideas is are very useful, for especially. The students are concerned. Our students are very much focusing on this particular area in the era of neo-liberal or post-neo-liberal era. So on behalf of Department of Political Science, I extend you a heartfelt thanks to you, sir. And I now hand over to our department chair, Professor Suresh, for the final remarks.
Okay, thank you, Sajjad Ibrahim, sir, for chairing this session and the wonderful presentation by Harish. Okay, Harish.
I had one question from some student. He said that what is the role of global civil society going for world government? So, my dear friend, it is a nice. We people are quite fanciful people and utopian people, Indians especially, because we people are by nature poets also. So world civil society, the idea is fine, but the problem with world civil society is again the same. That civil society is again divided on ethnic and territorial lines. So there is no uniformity. If some civilian group at global level emerges, which commands at least not 193 states, which commands at least 100 states, represents at least 100 states' opinion about the world government. So that kind of NGO can lead, we can register certain progress towards a world government if this kind of activity takes place. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, Suresh, sir.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Harish ji, for all these comments and those who have raised the questions and comments.